On the night of August 25, 1939, under the cover of a blackout, Hitler ordered the German army to move into concealed positions along the Polish border. But just as the troops finished assembling, Hitler abruptly canceled the entire operation, which had been scheduled for the 26th. The delay was due to the hesitation of his Italian counterpart, Mussolini. Some German generals were furious. Speed is of the essence in war, they argued, and this would only tip their hand and alert the enemy. Other generals believed that despite the tense situation, a large-scale war would not break out. One of the optimists was the 48-year-old Erwin Rommel, the future Desert Fox. At the time, he had been promoted to Major General less than a month earlier. When the Poland crisis erupted, Rommel was ordered to the Führer's headquarters. Parting with his beloved wife, Lucy, in Wiener Neustadt, he confidently told her, "Don't you worry. As long as the generation that fought in the First World War is still alive, there will never be a second one." On August 31st, Rommel wrote to Lucy again, saying, "How will the situation develop? I don't think it will come to a major conflict. The military genius had miscalculated." That very night, a unit of Nazi SS troops dressed in Polish uniforms staged surprise attacks on 3 German facilities along the border to frame the Polish army. Around 10 a.m. on September 1st, Hitler, wearing a lapelled military jacket with a conspicuous imperial eagle on his left arm, addressed the Kroll Opera House in Berlin. His voice, magnetic and deeply stirring, rang out, "Last night, for the first time, regular Polish soldiers fired on our territory. Since 4:45 a.m., we have been returning fire, and the shelling has not stopped. I have once more put on the uniform that is to me the most sacred and dear. I shall not take it off again until victory is secured, or I will not survive the outcome." On August 22, 1939, Heinz Guderian was appointed commander of the German 19 Army Corps. The 19 Corps was a motorized unit that included the 3rd Panzer Division, the 2nd and 20th Motorized Divisions, and attached support troops. The 3rd Panzer Division was well equipped for its time, reinforced with a tank training battalion armed entirely with the newest Panzer III and Panzer IV medium tanks. The former, produced by Daimler-Benz starting in 1936, was equipped with an anti-tank gun and served as the German Army's main battle tank in the early years of the war. The latter, which went into production in 1935, was designed to support infantry and work in concert with the anti-tank focused Panzer III. These 2 tanks represented the cutting edge of German armored forces and would play a crucial role in the Blitz of Poland. When the fighting began, the German army was supposed to advance in coordination with the Air Force. However, a heavy fog had rolled in overnight, preventing the Luftwaffe from providing effective ground support. Still, swarms of tanks were already roaring across the border, grinding their way into Polish territory. Guderian's 19 Corps, part of the 4th Army of Army Group North, was ordered not to open fire due to the thick fog. But the heavy artillery crews of the 3rd Panzer Division couldn't contain their excitement and began firing into the mist anyway. The first shell landed about 160 feet in front of Guderian's armored command vehicle. Before he could react, a second shell exploded a short distance behind him. He quickly ordered his driver to turn, but the dense shelling rattled the man, who panicked and slammed on the gas, driving the vehicle straight into a ditch. The half-track's front axle was mangled, rendering it useless. Luckily, Guderian was uninjured. The first battle of his signature military theory had gotten off to a rather embarrassing start for the father of the Blitzkrieg. Guderian returned to Corps headquarters for a new command vehicle, chewed out the reckless artillerymen, and raced back to the battlefield. He became the first Corps-level commander to use an armored command vehicle on the front lines to keep pace with his tanks. By the time the fog lifted, the lead units of the 3rd Panzer Division were already engaging Polish defenders. Facing the furious onslaught of German tanks, the Poles fought back fearlessly. Their skilled anti-tank gunners scored hits on several of the 3rd Panzer Division's tanks, killing 8 tank crewmen, 1 officer, and 1 officer candidate in the initial engagement. But flesh and blood were ultimately no match for the tide of steel. The tank columns tore a huge gap in the Polish defensive line. By the time Guderian's command vehicle caught up with the 3rd Panzer Division, its vanguard had already pushed to the Brda River. Along the 1,750-mile Polish-German border, the roar of tank armor thundered across the sky. Infantry smashed through obstacles and knocked down border markers, followed by wave after wave of tanks that crushed Polish resistance. The 4th Army, including Guderian's 19th Corps, quickly broke out of Pomerania and into the Polish corridor. The 3rd Army also attacked from 2 directions. The I Corps drove south toward Warsaw, while the XXI Corps struck southwest toward the base of the Polish corridor. Simultaneously, in the south, the 10th Army advanced southeast toward Warsaw. On its left flank, the 8th Army pushed toward Lodz, and on its right, the 14th Army advanced along the Vistula River toward Krakow. By that afternoon, the 10th Army had penetrated 15 miles into Poland. The Poles, for their part, were not entirely unprepared. With a full mobilization, their army numbered 1.75 million men, with another 500,000 in reserve. While they lacked the firepower of the German army, a concentrated defense in key areas might have allowed them to hold out longer and wait for the situation to change, preventing such a swift defeat. But Poland's defensive plan had a fatal flaw. They positioned their 7 armies all along the expected routes of invasion in a counterclockwise deployment from the north, leaving the eastern border with the Soviet Union completely undefended. The German general Erich von Manstein called this a protect-everything mindset, and it was precisely this thinking that prevented them from achieving local superiority anywhere. The Polish deployment demonstrated a desire to not give up any territory, but it lacked a clear operational strategy. They had also mistakenly assumed the Germans would attack according to French military doctrine, expecting the battle to soon bog down into trench warfare. The Polish preparations were substantial and their resistance was heroic. Many of their officers were even optimistic that they could defeat the Germans just as they had defeated the Red Army in 1920. However, the Germans' new blitzkrieg tactics shattered these illusions with lightning speed. The unrelenting tide of steel swiftly broke through the Polish lines. But that wasn't all. The German warplanes screaming across the skies of Poland would become an inescapable nightmare for the Polish soldiers. The second novel feature of the Blitzkrieg was the use of massive air power to carry out brutal bombing runs before the ground troops attacked. The German Air Force, or Luftwaffe, was formed late, not officially established until March 16, 1935, when Hitler tore up the Treaty of Versailles. In command was the World War I flying ace Hermann Göring. Even before its official founding, however, the Luftwaffe had been training thoroughly. The moment it was announced, it was already a formidable force, not only leading Europe in numbers but also possessing highly advanced combat aircraft. Most importantly, many of its pilots already had real combat experience. Remember Picasso's Guernica? 2.5 years earlier, on April 26, 1937, the German Luftwaffe had bombed Guernica, a major town in Spain's northern Basque Country. The 3-hour bombardment leveled the town and killed or injured countless civilians, creating the hellish scene depicted in Picasso's masterpiece. Having gained invaluable experience in the Spanish Civil War, the Luftwaffe's bombing of Poland would be even more intense, bloody, and devastating. In the initial assault alone, the Germans deployed over 2,000 aircraft, hitting 21 airfields inside Poland while bombers targeted the country's strategic centers, transportation hubs, and command structures. In an instant, Poland's towns, troops, arsenals, airfields, railways, roads, and bridges all became targets for the Luftwaffe. The first planes to fly into Poland were one of the most famous bombers of World War II, the Junkers Ju-87B1, also known by a name that struck terror in all who heard it, the Stuka. This dive bomber served as the vanguard of the Blitzkrieg. It could not only precisely destroy targets but also act as aerial artillery, strafing enemy ground forces in direct support of its own troops. The Stuka's stable flight characteristics and sturdy construction made it exceptionally popular with the Luftwaffe. Its distinctive Jericho trumpet, a wind-driven siren that produced a terrifying wail during a dive, signaled imminent bombing and death, striking fear into the hearts of all who heard it. For the Poles, the shriek of the Stuka was the call of the Grim Reaper. Poland's main forces were almost entirely deployed along the border, with very little depth to their defenses. They were completely unaware of the new German tactic of combined ground and air assault known as blitzkrieg. Once the German squadrons crossed the border, there was nothing to stop them. The Luftwaffe flew through uncontested skies, free to bomb anything they wished to destroy. If not for a bit of luck from Mother Nature, the casualties on the first day of the war would have been far more horrific. The Luftwaffe had a complete and precise bombing plan that included the Polish capital, Warsaw, as a primary target. But on September 1st, when the offensive began, a thick fog blanketed northern Poland, severely reducing visibility and hampering the Luftwaffe's bombing efficiency. This forced Göring to issue the order: Operation Seaside will not be carried out today. Operation Seaside was the plan for all air fleets to launch a concentrated attack on Warsaw on the afternoon of September 1st. The dense fog over northern Poland had delayed this catastrophe. Southern Poland, however, was cursed with clear skies and became a playground for the rampaging Luftwaffe. As the 10th Army advanced eastward, swarms of Stukas flew ahead of the front lines to the village of Panki, dropping the first wave of small, contact-fused bombs. As explosions ripped through the area, the village and its surroundings were engulfed in a sea of fire. Though they suffered heavy casualties, the Polish troops fought back through the bombardment. Stukas dived, their machine guns strafing as anti-aircraft cannons roared in defiance. The battle was exceptionally fierce. Of course, this localized resistance could not stop the advance of the overwhelmingly superior German forces, and the Polish troops were ultimately destined to be crushed. The battle at Panki became the first instance in World War II of the Luftwaffe providing direct support to ground forces. That evening, the German High Command added a special note to its report on the Air Force's achievements. Several attack wings effectively supported the Army's offensive. Although northern Poland had some cover from the weather, it could not escape the Luftwaffe's clutches. As a Polish cavalry unit was assembling near Wilen, the harbingers of hell, the Stukas, came screaming from the sky. The cavalry was hit by wave after wave of attacks from the air, something they had never before experienced. The ground instantly descended into chaos. Many Polish horsemen became casualties of the bombs before they could even ride to the front to fight the enemy. At the same time, German planes invaded the skies over Warsaw. Despite extremely poor visibility on the ground, bombs still hit the state-owned PZL factory. The facility, which produced Poland's fighter and bomber aircraft, was immediately consumed by fire and reduced to rubble. On the first day of the war alone, one German air group flew 30 missions, 17 of which targeted Polish Air Force ground facilities, 8 supported ground troops, and 5 directly attacked the Polish Navy. They destroyed approximately 30 Polish aircraft on the ground and shot down 9 in the air. The Germans themselves lost 14 planes, most of them hit by Polish anti-aircraft fire from the ground. The greatest tragedy befell Poland as civilians. The town of Wilen, about 60 miles east of Wrocław, was subjected to indiscriminate bombing by the Luftwaffe. On the first day of the war, over 1,600 civilians were killed, accounting for a tenth of the town's population. The town was almost completely flattened. Even worse, Poland's railway system was destroyed by bombers escorted by Messerschmitt Bf 110 fighters, trapping nearly 1 million Polish soldiers who were trying to assemble in response to the government's mobilization order. In the first few days of the war, countless Polish factories, shops, and schools were bombed, and fires burned in over 30 towns. In just a few days, the beautiful country was scarred and devastated. After September 3rd, the Germans declared the Polish Air Force completely annihilated. While this was an exaggeration, it was true that no force remained that could stop the Stukas from sweeping across every inch of Polish airspace at will. The Navy's battleships, the Army's infantry, cavalry, armored divisions, and motorized units, the Air Force's fighters and bombers, and the politically motivated SS were all thrown into the Polish campaign. The combination of continuous bombing, concentrated tank formations, and coordinated multi-branch operations was like a flash flood. Although the German armored forces at the time still included many older Panzer I and Panzer II tanks, using them in concentrated masses unleashed an unexpectedly devastating power. Thousands of tanks, supported by other military branches, were unstoppable, sweeping across Poland at speeds that cavalry could never hope to match. It was the first time in the history of warfare that a large-scale mechanized force had gone on the offensive, and it gave the world its first look at the shocking tactics of the Blitzkrieg. On September 3rd, the same day Britain and France declared war on Germany, German forces advancing to the Vistula River completed their encirclement of the Pomeranian army in the Polish corridor. In his memoirs, Guderian described it as a swift and foregone conclusion. The Polish cavalry, ignorant of the capabilities of our tanks, suffered enormous losses. A Polish artillery regiment moving towards the Vistula was caught by our tanks and completely destroyed. Only 2 of their guns had a chance to fire. The Polish infantry also suffered heavy casualties. Some of their bridging columns were captured during their retreat, and the rest were annihilated. On September 5th, the German 4th Army and 3rd Army linked up in the Grudziądz area, cutting off the Polish corridor. By the time the fighting in the Polish corridor had ended, the German 10th Army had pushed 60 miles into Poland and was less than 60 miles from the capital, Warsaw. To the 10th Army's left, the 8th Army was advancing on Lodz. To its right, the 14th Army was preparing to capture Krakow. The German armies were rapidly closing in to besiege the Polish capital. Although Hitler had fully embraced this tactical theory before the war, even he was shocked at how much could be achieved in so little time. In those first few days, he would excitedly describe the concepts and successes of the Blitzkrieg to Rommel, who was by his side. Hitler's valet Heinz Ling later wrote in his memoirs, Hitler allowed him Rommel to take part in situation conferences, invited him to meals, passed on information to him, which made Rommel look as if he were specially authorized, explained to him how tanks, assault troops, and dive bombers cooperated, explained that surprise attacks must be contained from outside, and made his own strategy and tactics clear to him. I even got the impression that Rommel greedily wanted to engrave every word the Führer said upon his heart. Also on September 5th, Guderian received a surprise of his own. The Führer himself came to inspect his corps. Guderian was picked up in Hitler's personal car and driven along the 19 Corps route of advance to admire the great successes of the campaign's first phase. As the car passed a destroyed Polish artillery position, Hitler had it stop. He stared for a moment at the bombed-out bridge over the Vistula River, then turned and asked, "Our dive bombers did that?" Guderian replied, "No, our panzers.